Fire tests gold, suffering tests brave men. You said yes again. You felt your jaw tighten before the word even left your mouth, and you said yes anyway, because saying no would have cost you something you did not feel like paying today. You have done this so many times that you no longer notice the moment it happens, the moment where you hand over a piece of your own position just to keep the room calm. This is not about the people who pushed you into that moment. This is about what happens the next time you are standing in a room, in a meeting, in your own kitchen, and you feel that same tightening in your chest, and you have to decide, again, whether you are going to defend the ground you already earned or quietly give it away one more time. What follows is the difference between the version of you who keeps giving that ground away without noticing and the version of you who has already learned how to hold it. Not through arguing harder, not through getting louder, through something the Stoics understood about the only fight that has ever actually mattered. The cost nobody sees. Most men who have built something real have also built a habit they rarely talk about, the habit of folding early, not in big visible ways, in small ones. You let the comment slide because correcting it would take energy you do not have left today. You agree with a decision in the meeting that you privately think is wrong, because disagreeing means a longer conversation, and you are tired of longer conversations. You let your time get taken, your evening get interrupted, your plans get rearranged, because the cost of holding your ground feels higher in the moment than the cost of giving in. Here is what most men miss about this pattern. Every time you fold, you are not just losing that one decision. You are training yourself quietly to expect that you will fold next time too. The body remembers what the mind agreed to. Your jaw learns to tighten and then release. Your chest learns to brace and then relax into compliance. Over years, this becomes the default setting. Not because you are weak, because nobody ever taught you that this was a fight in the first place, and that you have been losing it without ever stepping into the ring. The man who has already led people, who has already carried responsibility that other people only imagine, knows this feeling intimately. You can run a department, close a deal, raise a family, and still go quiet the moment someone you respect disagrees with you in a tone that makes your stomach drop. That contradiction is not unusual. It is almost universal among men who have built something worth protecting, because the more you have built, the more there is to lose by holding your ground, or so it feels in the moment. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from this pattern, one that does not show up on any health chart and does not get discussed in any performance review. It is the exhaustion of carrying two versions of every decision at once, the version you actually believe and the version you present out loud, because it is easier for everyone around you. Carrying both at the same time, every day, in every meeting, in every conversation at the dinner table, is its own form of labor. Nobody sees this labor. There is no line item for it, but it drains the same reserve of energy that you need for everything else in your life. And most men never connect the dots between the fatigue they feel by evening and the small surrenders they made by noon. This is also why a man can come home from a day where, on paper, nothing went wrong and still feel hollowed out. The meetings were fine. The decisions got made. Nobody yelled, and yet something in him feels smaller than it did that morning, because somewhere in the middle of that ordinary day, he agreed with something he did not believe, or stayed quiet when he had something worth saying, and that small transaction cost him more than the day itself ever did. It is worth being precise about what this pattern is not. It is not weakness in the sense most men fear. A man who folds in these small moments is often, in every other respect, genuinely capable, genuinely competent, genuinely respected for what he produces. This is not a story about a man who cannot perform. It is a story about a specific, narrow blind spot that exists right alongside real strength, hidden by it, protected by it, because nobody questions a man's spine when his results speak for themselves. The folding happens quietly enough, and the output stays high enough that the cost never gets flagged as a problem worth solving until it eventually shows up somewhere unmistakable. A marriage that has gone flat, a position at work that gets undermined without explanation, a son or daughter who has started speaking to him the way he speaks to everyone else, without much expectation that he will push back. Most men who have tried to stop folding have done everything right on the surface. They have read the books on confidence. They have practiced the firmer tone of voice. They have rehearsed the conversation in the shower before having it in real life. And it still does not stick, because the fix they reached for was never aimed at the actual target. What follows is the explanation for why that happens and what the fight actually is. The fight you keep losing. Here is the part that gets missed in almost every conversation about confidence and assertiveness. The fight you are actually losing is not the one in the room. It is not the negotiation, the disagreement, the moment where someone challenges your decision in front of other people. Those are just the settings where the real fight gets exposed. The real fight is happening inside you, in the half second before you speak, where you decide whether you are going to represent what you actually think, or whether you are going to represent what will keep the moment comfortable. This is the distinction the Stoics drew between what is in your power and what is not. The other person's reaction is not in your power. Their opinion of you is not in your power. Whether they respect your boundary or resent it is not in your power. But what you say, what you choose to defend, and whether you betray your own judgment to avoid friction, that is entirely in your power, every single time, with no exceptions. This distinction sounds simple the first time you hear it, almost too simple to be useful, and that is exactly why so many men nod along with it and then keep folding the very next day. Understanding the idea is not the same as living by it. The idea has to survive contact with an actual moment, a real disagreement with a real person whose reaction you cannot predict, before it means anything at all. Most men apply this thinking perfectly well to situations that do not threaten them: traffic, weather, the outcome of a game they cannot control, and then abandon it completely the moment the pressure involves another human being whose approval they have quietly come to depend on. Marcus Aurelius did not write his private notebook to perform strength for an audience. He wrote it because he, an emperor with more external power than almost anyone in human history, still had to fight this same internal battle every morning before he had even left his tent. The throne did not exempt him from the fight. If anything, it made the fight louder because more people stood ready to tell him what he wanted to hear instead of what was true. It is worth sitting with that for a moment. A man who commanded armies, who could have silenced any disagreement with a single order, still woke up and reminded himself in writing that he would meet people that day who would try to pull him off his own position, and that the only real victory available to him was refusing to let that happen on the inside, regardless of what he allowed to happen on the outside. If a man with that much external power still had to fight for his own internal ground every single morning, the fight was never going to be solved by having more power, more authority, or more control over other people. It was always going to be solved somewhere else entirely. Be like the rocky headland on which the waves constantly break. It stands firm, and round it the seething waters are calmed. That image was not decoration for Marcus Aurelius. It was a description of what he was trying to become every single day, in rooms full of people whose careers depended on agreeing with him. The headland does not move when the wave hits it. It does not negotiate with the wave. It does not soften its edge to make the impact more comfortable. It simply remains what it already was. And the water, which seemed so forceful a second earlier, breaks apart around something that refused to relocate itself. Write in the comments right now, one word, for the moment in your life right now where you feel yourself bracing for a wave you have not yet decided how to meet. Understanding that the fight is internal changes how you see every confrontation in your life. But knowing that is not the same as knowing how to actually win it when your chest is tight and the room is staring at you. There is a specific moment inside that internal fight where almost every man makes the same mistake. And once you see it, you will recognize it happening in real time, possibly for the rest of your life. The man who has not seen this yet. Picture the version of a man who has not yet learned to fight for himself. He is not weak in any obvious sense. He shows up, he works hard, he provides. But internally, his decisions are run through a hidden filter that nobody told him was there. Will this make the other person comfortable? Will this avoid conflict? Will this keep the peace for one more day? He has mistaken the absence of friction for the presence of strength, and the two are not the same thing at all. This man over-explains himself in meetings where no explanation was required, because some part of him is still seeking permission for a decision he already had every right to make. He apologizes for taking up space in conversations he was invited into. He rehearses disagreements in his head for hours and then says nothing when the moment actually arrives, because the gap between what he privately believes and what he is willing to say out loud has grown so wide that crossing it feels like a much bigger risk than staying silent. At home, this shows up as quietly absorbing more than his share of frustration to avoid a difficult conversation with someone he loves. At work, it shows up as agreeing to deadlines he knows are unrealistic, because pushing back feels like it will mark him as difficult. With friends, it shows up as laughing along with a comment that actually bothered him, because correcting the room felt heavier than swallowing the irritation. None of this looks like cowardice from the outside. It looks like being easy to work with, being agreeable, being low maintenance. And that is exactly what makes it so dangerous, because nobody around this man is going to tell him that something is wrong. The people benefiting from his silence have no reason to point it out. There is also a quieter cost to this man that rarely gets named directly. Over time, the people closest to him stop bringing him their hardest, most honest opinions because they have learned, without anyone saying it out loud, that he will simply agree with whatever is presented to him. His agreement, once a meaningful signal, becomes background noise, something people stop listening for because it never changes anything. This is the strange trap inside folding too often. The more available a man makes his agreement, the less anyone values it, and the less anyone trusts that his eventual disagreement, on the rare occasion it happens, actually means something. He is a man of sense who does not quarrel with what he cannot help. Epictetus was not telling men to accept every insult and every overreach without resistance. He was drawing a precise line, and most men who quote this line miss exactly where it falls. He was talking about the outcome of an event that has already happened and cannot be undone, not about whether you defend your position before the outcome is decided. The line is not an excuse to fold early. It is a description of where to direct your energy once the moment has already passed and cannot be revisited. Confusing those two things is exactly how a man convinces himself that folding in advance is wisdom, when it is actually just folding in advance. There is a moment where this pattern breaks. It does not happen because the man suddenly becomes louder or angrier or starts picking fights he was avoiding before. It happens because of one specific realization that most men only stumble into by accident, usually after the cost of folding has finally become too expensive to ignore. What that realization actually is changes the entire shape of how a man carries himself afterward. The moment it breaks. The moment usually arrives quietly, not as a dramatic confrontation, but as a small, almost forgettable instant where a man notices, for the first time, that he is about to fold again, and he asks himself a question he has never actually asked before. Not whether the other person will be upset, not whether the room will be uncomfortable. The question is simpler and far more uncomfortable to sit with. What do I actually think is true here? And am I willing to be the only person in the room who says it? That question is the entire turning point. It does not require a speech. It does not require winning the argument. It only requires one honest answer, spoken out loud, even quietly, even with your voice slightly unsteady. The moment a man says what he actually believes instead of what keeps the peace, something shifts permanently in how he relates to every future version of that same pressure. He has proven to himself, not to anyone else, that the wave does not actually move him if he chooses to stay still. This is what the Stoics meant when they separated judgment from impression. An impression arrives uninvited. The tightness in your chest, the instinct to agree, the urge to smooth things over before anyone gets uncomfortable. A judgment is what you do with that impression once it arrives. The man who has not yet learned to fight for himself treats the impression as an instruction he must obey immediately. The man who has learned treats it as information, nothing more, something to notice, and then decide about deliberately. This separation is not a trick of willpower. It is closer to a habit of attention, one that has to be practiced the same way any other skill gets practiced, in small repetitions long before the moment that actually matters arrives. The first few times a man tries to pause between the impression and the response, it will feel unnatural, almost like holding his breath underwater. The impression will still arrive at full strength. The chest will still tighten. The urge to agree will still show up exactly on schedule. The only thing that changes gradually is how much authority that impression is given over what happens next. The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality. Carl Jung was describing something the Stoics had already mapped out centuries earlier in different language. The part of you that wants to avoid conflict at any cost, the part that has learned silence is safer than honesty, does not disappear just because you ignore it. It becomes the shadow Jung described, the part of your own character you have not yet looked at directly. Fighting for yourself is not about becoming a different, harder person. It is about finally looking directly at the part of you that learned folding was the safer option and deciding, consciously, that the cost of folding has become too high to keep paying. Write in the comments right now one phrase for the question you would have to ask yourself the next time you feel that familiar urge to agree, just to keep things calm. The man who has already seen this. Now picture the other version. Not a louder man. Not a man who has started picking fights to prove something to himself or to anyone watching. A quieter man, in most ways, than he used to be. He has stopped over-explaining his decisions because he no longer needs the room's approval before he trusts his own judgment. He says less in arguments than he once did, but what he says lands differently because every sentence comes from a place that has already settled the only question that matters. This is what I actually think, and I am willing to be the one who says it. This man still listens. He still changes his mind when someone presents something he genuinely had not considered. The difference is not stubbornness. The difference is that his agreement now means something. because it is no longer the automatic default he reaches for to avoid friction. When he disagrees, people notice, because it does not happen out of irritability. It happens because something actually mattered enough to him to say so. At home, this looks like having the difficult conversation instead of absorbing the resentment silently for another 6 months. At work, it looks like pushing back on the unrealistic deadline calmly, with reasons, instead of agreeing and then quietly resenting the people who asked. With friends, it looks like correcting the comment that actually bothered him, briefly, without turning it into a scene, and then moving on, because the goal was never to win, only to be honest. What changes most visibly in this man is not his volume, but his consistency. He no longer needs the situation to be high stakes before he speaks honestly, and he no longer waits for permission from his own anxiety before he decides whether something is worth saying. Small disagreements get handled in the moment they happen, instead of being stored up and released later as resentment dressed up as something else. People around him notice, even if they could not name exactly what changed. There is a steadiness to him now that was not there before, not because he has fewer difficult moments, but because each one gets resolved closer to where it started, instead of accumulating in a place where it eventually has to come out sideways. This is also a quieter man in rooms where he used to need to be heard. He has stopped needing the last word because the last word was never really the point. The point was always whether he had been honest somewhere in the conversation. And once that has happened, the outcome of the discussion stops carrying the same weight it used to. He can lose an argument and still walk away with his self-respect fully intact, because the thing he was actually protecting was never his ability to win. It was his ability to recognize his own voice when he heard it. It is the power of the mind to be unconquerable. Seneca was not describing a man who never loses an argument or never faces resistance. He was describing something quieter and far more durable. A mind that cannot be made to betray its own judgment, regardless of what pressure is applied from the outside. That is the actual target. Not winning every confrontation, not becoming someone other people are afraid to challenge, simply becoming a man whose internal position does not get negotiated away the moment the external pressure increases. This is the part most men get wrong when they try to apply this. They think fighting for yourself means becoming combative, defensive, ready to argue at the smallest provocation. It means the opposite. The man who has actually done this internal work argues less than he used to, not more, because he no longer needs to prove anything. He has already settled the only argument that mattered, the one with himself, in the quiet moment before anyone else was even in the room. Knowing the difference between these two men is not enough on its own. The actual shift happens in a much smaller, more specific moment than most men expect, and it happens in a place most men never think to look for it, where the fight actually happens. The fight for yourself does not happen in the big moments. It does not happen in the confrontation everyone can see. It happens in the half second before you speak, in the private decision about whether the next sentence out of your mouth will represent what you actually believe or what will keep the room comfortable. That half second is the entire battlefield. Everything else, the conversation, the tone, the outcome, is just the visible result of what already got decided in that half second, usually without anyone in the room realizing a decision was even being made. This is why the fight cannot be won through preparation alone. You can rehearse the perfect response in the shower 100 times and still fold in the actual moment, because the rehearsal happens with no real pressure attached to it. The half second only gets easier to win through repetition under real conditions, Small moments where the stakes are low enough to practice, but real enough to count. The colleague who interrupts you in a meeting. The family member who makes the comment that stings slightly. The friend who assumes you will say yes to something you would rather decline. Each of these is a small rehearsal for the larger version of the same fight. Treat these small moments as training rather than as inconvenience, and something changes in how you move through an ordinary week. A man who has decided that the small interruption in a meeting is worth a calm, direct correction is the same man who will not collapse later when the stakes are genuinely high, because he has already built the muscle in conditions where the cost of failing was low. A man who only ever practices holding his ground when the consequences are severe is, in effect, trying to learn a skill for the first time in the worst possible conditions to learn it. That is backwards, and it is exactly why so many men feel like they freeze in the moments that matter most. They never built the habit anywhere smaller first. Reject your sense of injury, and the injury itself disappears. This is not a suggestion to pretend nothing bothers you. It is a far more precise instruction. The injury you feel when someone challenges you, dismisses you, or pushes past your boundary is not the event itself. It is the story you immediately attach to the event, the interpretation that arrives a half second after the impression does. Reject the automatic story, the one that says you must respond immediately to protect your standing, and what remains is simply information you can act on deliberately, on your own terms, in your own time. The man who has done this work does not need to win every exchange in the moment it happens. He has learned that some of the most powerful responses are delivered calmly, an hour later, after the heat has left the room, because the fight was never about speed. It was about whether he eventually said what he actually believed, clearly, to the person who needed to hear it, regardless of how long that took. This is worth repeating, because it contradicts almost everything men are told about confrontation. You do not need the perfect line in the moment. You do not need to win the exchange in front of an audience. You need only to eventually close the gap between what you privately believe and what you were willing to say, even if closing that gap takes a phone call the next morning instead of a comeback in real time. Speed was never the measure. Honesty was. Write in the comments right now one word for the relationship in your life right now where you most need to have this fight, the one you have been postponing. Here is what all of this comes down to. The fight that matters is not the one in the room with other people. It is the one inside you, in the half second before you decide what to say. Folding early is not peace. It is a debt that compounds quietly until it becomes too expensive to keep paying. The man who has not yet learned this mistakes the absence of friction for the presence of strength. The man who has learned it has stopped needing the room's approval before he trusts his own judgment. The shift does not happen through becoming louder or more combative. It happens through one honest question, asked quietly, in a moment nobody else even notices is happening. And the practice ground for all of it is not the big confrontation. It is every small moment where you decide deliberately what you are willing to say out loud. Tonight, before you go to sleep, name one specific place in your life where you have been folding quietly, the conversation you have been avoiding, the boundary you have let slide, the agreement you gave that you did not actually mean. Decide, specifically, what you are going to say the next time that moment returns. Not in general terms, but the actual sentence. Write it down if you need to. Then say it the next time the moment arrives, even if your voice is not perfectly steady when you do. If this is the kind of thinking you want to keep building, This channel is here every week. Every video takes one idea further than the last. Subscribe so you do not miss what comes next.